So recently, LL Cool J was on Club Shay Shay. And, Shannon's been having quite a few guests on. He had Megan Good on and quite a few others. But there hasn't been any real viral moments until recently. And that's when Shannon asked Todd, who's his Mount Rushmore, on Def Jam. Now, usually you get the Mount Rushmore question. But kudos to Shannon or his team, whoever came up with that question. Because that's like, oh, that's a unique question. So he said his Mount Rushmore was himself, Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys, and Slick Rick. And I said, oh, he's going to get a lot of pushback on this list. Because even Shannon was like, he gave him a list of like Jay-Z, Nas, Kanye, Rihanna, Ja Rule. Like he gave him a list of people that's been around like for the past 20 years. But Todd gave his list because Todd was with Def Jam from the beginning. And of course, when I went to see how the people responded, they responded as I predicted. They did not like his list. I'm going to go over some of the things that people have said, and I'm going to respond to them. One of the things they said was he didn't put Jay-Z on LL didn't put Jay-Z on the list because he was jealous of Jay-Z or he's always been a hater of Jay-Z. Why should he be a hater of Jay-Z? First of all, Todd set the template for Jay-Z. LL Cool J was the first artist on Def Jam. He came after Curtis Blow. Curtis Blow was the first solo star in hip hop, and LL took that. He took what Run DMC was doing, and he took what Curtis Blow did and combined them, and he became the first real superstar in hip hop. Everything that you see that dudes do today as a solo artist is because of him. I Need Love was a brand new concept. Dudes weren't making love songs like that. He said, you got to do something for the ladies. He did something for the ladies. Like everything, every template, it doesn't matter if it's Tupac, DMX, Nas. If you talk to any of those dudes, talk to any of these dudes that's 40 and up, and ask them who was the template for them for a solo rapper. 9 times out of 10 it was LL Cool J. This is before Biggie. This is for Biggie and Pac. It's before Pac. People kind of go to Pac, but if Pac was alive, you ask him, it was LL. So yeah, most definitely LL should be on the list. In fact, LL was the first one that came up with the whole thing with the GOAT. Because I don't think, as the years went along, I don't think LL felt like he was getting enough credit for being the greatest of all time. So he named his greatest hits album, the greatest of all time. That's where the GOAT thing came from. Came from him. So yeah, wholeheartedly LL should be on this because he started Def Jam with Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons. And I don't even understand why people think he's jealous of Jay-Z. LL started in 1984. He signed with Def Jam in 1984. His last big hit, was Head Sprung with Timbaland in 2004. That's 20 years. That's 20 years there. And up until May, he was on TV. And his last hit show was NCIS Hawaii. That's another 20 years. He's been in this game for 40 years. There's nothing for him to be jealous about when it comes to LL Cool J. He is an icon. He's an underrated icon, but he is an icon. And plus, FUBU. Damon John and FUBU wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for LL. LL Cool J, when FUBU first started, was a walking billboard for FUBU. He wore FUBU hats, FUBU shirts. He just wore it. Now, I don't know if he was like an investor. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I don't know if he was an investor or a board member, whatever it was. But they got free advertising for FUBU because of LL. Damon John should always send LL a Christmas card for kicking off his career because how much Todd did for FUBU and that company. Okay, DMX. People were saying, well, how come DMX is on the list? DMX saved Def Jam. Well, yes and no. Earl had a ton of hits. Earl had a string of number one albums. Like if you look at the history of DMX, it's absolutely amazing where he came from and the dominance he had on the charts. And this is the era of Jay-Z and Eminem. Like DMX was a dominant artist. And even when I work out, there's no other artist that I can listen to. I listen to a lot of artists. But when I hear a DMX song, it just gets me hyped. DMX wants you to start punching a bag when you have no strength. DMX was great. And I hate that they're using his music now in commercials that he can't really reap from that. Like, I don't think we gave DMX enough love as he got older. He had issues, but still DMX was great. However, he didn't save Def Jam alone. It was him and Rough Riders. It was Jay-Z and Rockefeller. And it was Ja Rule and Murder Inc. Leo Cohen did these boutique label deals, and that's when he signed Rough Riders, Rockefeller, and Murder Inc., and they all proved to be great, right? Like some might argue that Ja Rule should be on the list. Okay, that's fine. It's fine for you to write Ja Rule. He's not better than the people that LL listed, but I mean, I totally get it. But yeah, I understand why people would add Earl to the list. But it's Todd's list, and Todd's list was correct. Run DMC, people would say, well, how come Run DMC's not on this list? They was never on Def Jam. They was on Profile Records. Russell Simmons, Joey Simmons' brother, was their manager. But Def Jam didn't exist yet. And they signed with Profile. And that's where Rockbox was on Profile, King of Rock was on Profile, Hard Times, It's Like That, all Profile. Walk This Way, Profile. Walk This Way of Aerosmith, Run DMC, Profile. It's all Profile. Now, Run DMC was also under Rush management. So you can be a successful rapper in the late 80s and not be under Rush management. Rush management ran. They managed everybody. It doesn't matter if Run DMC, LL, Latifah, De La Soul, Jay Jeff the Fresh Prince, Public Enemy. Everybody was under Rush. This is way before Violator Records and all Violator management, all this stuff. It was Rush. Rush was the preeminent management company. So yes. So for that, there's the Russell connection there. But on Def Jam, no. Run DMC was never on Def Jam, and there was a guy he was adamant about that. No, they were on Def Jam, and I showed them. This was on X, and I gave him like a picture of them on Profile, and then he wrote me back, "Oh well, I already talked to people about it, so kick rocks." So I sent him a gif of Denzel slamming the door in his face. Like, get out of here, get out of here. It's not my fault you don't know your history. Research. EPMD. People, which I kind of like. I like the people are fighting for EPMD. EPMD, to me, was the first rap act to have 3 great rap albums. Because most of the times people had like 2. Like even with LL, he had Radio, he had Bigger and Deffer, which was great, and then he had Walking with a Panther. He slipped, and then he came back when Mama Said Knock You Out. That's why another thing why LL is so great. He kept on coming back. But yeah, EPMD was great. Like in the beginning, they gave you got to chill and Strictly Business, and It's My Thing. And by that 3rd album, you got like the Crossover and Gold Digger. Oh my God. I listened to Gold Digger like a month ago. Woo, that song is so relevant today. Do yourself a favor. Gold Digger by EPMD. Fantastic song about relationships. Fantastic. They had Rampage with LL at the end. Crossover. When I was a DJ mixing songs, the Crossover, you can mix so many songs into the Crossover, man. The Crossover was a fantastic song to mix. Oh, I love the Crossover. But EPMD was always great. However, they were not greater than the Beastie Boys, because it seemed like the act they kept on wanting to try to take off the list was the Beastie Boys. We would not be talking about DMX. We would not be talking about Jay-Z. We wouldn't be talking about Will Smith or anybody in film if it wasn't for the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys, there are preeminent acts that opened the door for hip-hop, that expanded the game. Run DMC had the first rap video on MTV with Rockbox. The Fat Boys, even though they made corny movies down the road, they still were hip. They still was making movies as rappers, and that opened the door to pop culture. And down the road, you had like MC Hammer. But the Beastie Boys with License to Ill. We might not be having this discussion today. We might not be talking about Yo MTV Raps. We might not be talking about anything if it wasn't for License to Ill. License to Ill opened the door for a lot of these cats. As great as LL was, he wasn't crossing over. As great as PE was, they weren't really crossing over at first. The Beastie Boys opened the door for everybody. And the greatest thing about the Beastie Boys is that when you bought that License to Ill album, they had a hip-hop side and they had a rock side. Because the thing about these Beastie Boys that was always authentic was that they were punk rock kids who loved hip-hop. They didn't, and when they got into Def Jam, they didn't all of a sudden try to act like LL or Run DMC. Even though they admired those guys, they were still themselves. There was 3 Jewish kids from New York who loved rock and they loved hip-hop, and they put it together. And it was authentically themselves. And I think that's why they got a lot of respect from dudes back in the day. They weren't trying to be anything they're not. They didn't do the Vanilla Ice thing. But Vanilla Ice was saying like, yeah, man. Even though people loved Ice Ice Baby when it first came out, Bill Nye created so many lies about himself, people just didn't like him anymore. This is why I think people have much respect for Eminem. Eminem, he's going on the whole Slim Shady thing. He's still the same guy he was when he first came out. There's nothing different about Marshall Mathers than when he first came out. He's the Dr. Dre and 50 Cent is the same guy they met 20 some odd years ago. He's the same guy. And I think the Beasties are the same way. It's not like today. Today you got MGK. Like MGK made Wild Boys years ago, hard hip hop track. Now he's doing like a country song with a Jelly Roll. Post Malone came out hip hop. Post Malone came out hip hop. He's doing a country song. And no offense, right? They just kind of found another niche and they're making music and they're making money, which is fantastic. But there's a drastic difference where MGK was then where he is now. There's a drastic difference where Post Malone is and where he is now. The Beastie Boys, no matter what is said, they're still authentically the same people. They gave you rock, they gave you hip hop, and equally well. And the funny thing is, they did this on one album on Def Jam. They only had one album on Def Jam, and that was Licensed to Ill. And they ran into those contract issues. They didn't like it, and then they moved. I think they went to Capitol, I think, and that's where they dropped Paul's Boutique. And the Paul's Boutique was a game changer because that's up there with 3 Feet High and Rising with De La Soul and Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions. The patchwork of samples that they use on Paul's Boutique, and that led to like Ill Communication and Check Your Head. The Beastie Boys never get discussed in these arguments about hip hop, and they should, because if you take them out, hip hop is going a totally different trajectory. Hip hop might actually grow slower because the Beasties run along. So LL is correct when he had the Beastie Boys. So that was the arguments that was made. I didn't even touch on PE. Like Public Enemy made us. Public Enemy. This is why I feel bad for the kids today. Public Enemy made us crack open books to learn about Malcolm X. Because most of them, when we got Black history in school, was about Martin Luther King and some things about slavery and George Washington Carver and the Peanut. Public Enemy made us learn about the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, the FOIs, Black history. Like Boogie Out Productions, they really made us think. Like even with Flav, one of the biggest songs ever by Public Enemy is 911 is a joke. And even though Flame was the principal rapper and not Chuck, it's one of his biggest songs and even one of the most serious songs. Because it's a fantastic song. 9 Living Bass Heads. Like their first album was Yo Bun Rush the Show. And I caught on with them late because they had this song My Uzi Weighs a Ton. That's when I caught on to them late. But then I was there for It Takes a Nation of Millions and Fear of a Black Planet. And if you're a hip hop fan, you swear that you're a hip hop fan, you should always at least have one PE album in your discography. Either get It Takes a Nation of Millions or get Fear of a Black Planet. Even if you don't listen to it, just keep it in your catalog and maybe one day you will listen to it. That's why I feel so bad today, because the culture, when I was younger, the culture was represented by Public Enemy. The culture today is represented by Megan Thee Stallion and Sexy Red. And no offense to those ladies, they're making money, they're doing their thing. But these kids, these young folks, you ain't gaining no knowledge from them. What, you probably new twerking trip tips? You gaining nothing from them. Nothing. So that's where I miss PE. I wish there was a balance where you had a PE to counteract Sexy. So you can have a Sexy Red and Cardi B and them have fun with that. And then also you had this intelligent hip hop over there who made you think. Like, I wish we had that today, but there's no balance today. So PE is so important. And lastly, I'll talk about Slick Rick. Why Slick Rick is on the list. Slick Rick was the ultimate storyteller. Usually when people say talk about who's the greatest rapper of all time, like some people would say Rakim, some people say Big Daddy Kane. But from a storytelling aspect, Ice Cube was a better rapper because of Slick Rick. Snoop Dogg was a better rapper because of Slick Rick. You know how many people redid Lottie Dottie by Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh? Like Eminem is because of Slick Rick. Like Outkast. Like there's so many artists that was influenced by Slick Rick, and there was the Adventure Slick Rick album, the Misadventure Slick Rick album. It's just like the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, where she did all her damage on one album, and he did all his damage on one album as well. And part of it is after the album's out, he had hits, he got in trouble, and he got deportation issues, and then he couldn't make music, and I think he got locked up, and then by the time he came out, music had changed and shifted. So Slick Rick, for what he did in 1988 with that one album, changed the trajectory of so many guys writing lyrics. Nas, like just to be able to craft stories, he was just the ultimate storyteller. And if you don't know anything about Slick Rick, I would say go to Will Smith had the Class of '88 podcast, really really good podcast about the year of 1988. Go to episode 8. It features Slick Rick, and it details the story that when Slick Rick first came out, it was Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh. They had the show Flipside Lottie Dottie. Russell Simmons wanted to sign Dougie Fresh. Rick Rubin wanted Slick Rick because he said Rick is the one. Dougie's cool, but we need to sign Slick Rick. Slick makes the album, and it's sat. I don't even know why it's at. Def Jam kept it on the shelf for like 3 years. Because when I first heard, when the album came out in '88, it's like, why does this music sound so much like the show? Because it's like, it was like throughout the album. I couldn't understand it because it was 1988 and no one's using that sound anymore because it sat for 3 years. And Slick, I guess the story went, Slick got so frustrated because it was him, and he waited and waited, and then he saw Rakim come out, and he saw Big Daddy Kane come out, and he said, man, I got to do something or I'm just going to be lost. I'm going to be lost in the sauce. People are not even going to care about me. And he found a track that was on his album. He leaked it to a radio station. They played it. The fans loved it. And that forced Def Jam to drop that album, The Misadventures of Slick Rick, 3 years later after it was made. That's a heck of a story. Storytelling alone. Because Slick Rick didn't cross over. Like, he had children's story, but he wasn't a big crossover artist. But the impact that he had on hip-hop. So yeah, we can put Jay-Z on the list. We could put DMX on the list. We could even put Kanye on the list. But I'm telling you, where would a lot of these rappers be without Slick Rick? He is a genius. He had his own style, his own sound, everything. So LL Cool J's list of his Mount Rushmore of himself, Public Enemy, Slick Rick, and the Beastie Boys is quite accurate. I understand if people find this list disturbing, but that's just because this era doesn't do their research. You guys just don't go deep enough on these things. You just look at today. Now again, my generation did the same thing. We did. I had a stupid argument when I was in my 20s. My mom loved Patti LaBelle. I love Patti LaBelle. And I was cool with her, but my mom didn't play too much Aretha Franklin. I was talking to a friend of mine back then. I said, you know what? I think Patti LaBelle's a better singer than Aretha Franklin. And he almost stopped being my friend. He's like, what are you talking about? Because he was deep into Aretha. Like, his mom listened to Aretha, so he's deep. But as I got older and I went into her catalog, as much as I love Patti LaBelle, and I wish there was a young Patti LaBelle today singing, because we need a young Patti LaBelle. Patti LaBelle doesn't compare to Aretha Franklin. And Patti LaBelle, I'm sure, would have told me, dude, you're wrong. It's Aretha. Aretha Franklin is legendary. Her catalog is so deep. So when I see young people and they look at his list and it's like, oh, LL's 60 years old. Like, he's old. He doesn't, he's mad at the younger generation. No, he understands the history of hip hop. And I wish younger people would do their own due diligence and do their deep dive on the history of hip hop. But I understand it. I do. I was a young guy once. Sometimes you don't know stuff. You just know what's happening today, and you say, "This is what's hot today, and this is what I like." But I'm above all of YouTube and Spotify and all these things that we have today. Please do your research. Go listen to a playlist from 1988, 89, 90, 91, 92. Go listen to those things. Like, I wish I could recommend you to listen to Radio by LL Cool J or Bigger and Deffer, but I can't, because those records are very 80s sounding records. And as much as I love these records, for a lot of young folks, they'll probably sound very dated and very old. And the line, you might not even appreciate what LL was rhyming about. So I totally understand it. I totally understand it. So, but if you're a pure hip hop head and you love hip hop and you don't know the origins of hip hop, I would say check out Radio, Bigger and Deffer by LL, and even Walk Like a Panther, because there's lessons he learned on that album that he took with him to make Mama Said Knock You Out. Like, even that song, I'm That Type of Guy, wasn't a huge success. That's a damn good tune. That's a damn good tune, man. But again, we wouldn't have got Mama Said Knock You Out if he didn't fail. And that's the thing you got to learn from LL Cool J. He failed a lot. Dudes was always battling him. Kumo D battled him. I think he battled with Ice-T. He was battling with everybody. The only person that got him was Cassidy. Cassidy was the only one that kind of got him on that second round knockout. But, you didn't challenge LL. Jack the Ripper is still one of the best diss records of all time. And that was on the flip side of going back to Cali. Going back to Cali was so different. He took chances as an artist. No one takes chances today. Or very few. So shout out to LL Cool J being on Club Shay Shay with his Mount Rushmore of Def Jam artists. Shout out to Shannon Sharpe with that question, because he got the streets talking. But Ty was absolutely right.